my son Ian. I write a lot about him in the book, so you have a face now for by the book and read the chapters. Before I read, I want to address the most frequently asked question about my book. Why is it called Uncommon Core? The term Common Core may have different meanings for people depending on what their political affiliations are. It also has different meanings depending on whether that person's a teacher or a parent, or if they're engaged in secondary or primary schools. On the surface, Common Core is just the name given to standards, and there's nothing really wrong with standards, right? As long as those standards are just guidelines. When those standards become a mandated curriculum that is used to evaluate teachers and label students, I have a problem with that. Another consequence of this legislation from supposed educational reformers is that it has created a generation of followers instead of out-of-the-box thinkers. Students are told what to learn, when to learn it, for the pleasure of taking a test that will label them. So no, I'm not a fan of Common Core state standards. However, my book is not about those Common Core standards. My book is about the soft skills that cannot be written as curriculum to be measured on a test. So in that way, Uncommon Core is really the anti-Common Core. It is the opposite of Common Core. These are the skills that colleges, universities, and businesses say are more important than the knowledge students learned and quickly forgot after high school. In the real world, we don't acquire knowledge on a time limit. We don't define success by someone's ability to answer a multiple choice question. We define success by how well people can adapt to a situation, by how well they think on their feet, and on whether they wait around for things to happen to them or they make things happen. We want to work with people who are assets, who are independent, who are problem solvers and leaders. The chapter I'm going to read to you is about teaching children how to become problem solvers and leaders. In order to do this, students need to take an active role in their education. When I taught high school English, I didn't want my students to sit passively in class and let other people make decisions for them. I wanted them engaged with their learning. When students are engaged in their education, they learn important life lessons that stick with them. They make mistakes, but they learn how to correct them. They want to learn so they understand their world and themselves better. When they are allowed to learn just for the sake of learning, they become free to explore the possibilities. So this chapter is just one of the ways I help my students do that. So now from my book, Chapter 14, Teach Them to Be Problem Solvers. One of the biggest problems facing companies today is the lack of solutions-oriented employees. More and more I hear about bosses looking for this specific trait in the people they hire. I saw the genesis of this problem while teaching. It started with students coming to high school passively involved in their education. They'd actually say stuff like this to me. Just tell me what's going to be on the test so I can memorize it. It quickly moved into students who used excuses as justifiable reasons for being unprepared. Oh, I left my book at school, couldn't read the chapter, oh well. I lost my handout, couldn't study, couldn't finish it. I didn't understand the assignment, and I was just supposed to accept those excuses. This attitude has become pandemic in schools. That is why it's so refreshing when students are problem solvers. Part of it is leadership skills, but it's more than that. Problem solvers do not wait around for someone to tell them what to do. Instead, these students see a problem and they figure out the best way to solve it. Here are some examples of students who are problem solvers. I'm sorry, I'm going to need to take a little drink. Students who look up words they do not understand research grammar rules to apply to their writing, or look through their handbook for answers rather than sitting at home and giving up on an assignment because it's too confusing. Students who make copies of vocabulary lists they lost or misplaced. Call a friend from class to get the vocabulary list, or search the classroom website for the list instead of trying to use irresponsibility as an excuse before the next vocabulary test. Students who read through packets, handouts, or textbook chapters for answers to their questions rather than giving up on their homework. Students who ask parents for help or email their teachers with questions rather than staring dumbfounded at an assignment. Students who look up literature online, look for online textbooks, or see if they can borrow a textbook from a friend when they have left their textbook at school rather than using that as an excuse for coming unprepared to class. That's really refreshing when I get students like that, when they just take care of it. They don't come in and tell me these excuses. Now I'm going to read a parable I call it Parables from the Portable. And if you don't know what a portable is, it's a trailer that the school would purchase, and they would put it on school grounds because we didn't have enough classroom space for students. And that's where I taught for the majority of my years teaching. So one of the best lessons I taught all year was the one that went along with teaching George Orwell's Animal Farm. It is also the lesson that separates students into leaders and followers, into problem solvers and excuse makers. Animal Farm is an incredible allegory that illustrates Karl Marx's well-meaning communism, how it prompted the people to overthrow the autocracy of Tsar Nicholas II, and ultimately how Joseph Stalin used those very principles against the people who thought they were fighting for their equality. The novel works well in either a history class or a literature class, which makes teaching the novel multifaceted. I had 3 goals when teaching the novel. 1, help students see how they participate in sabotaging their own freedom and equality in their everyday lives as well as in government issues. 2, teach them how to write a powerful analytical argument on the abuse of power. 3, hold up a mirror for them so they can see who they are as opposed to who they want to be. How do I accomplish this? For number 1, we had a number of shared inquiry sessions in which I asked them questions about the novel and their lives. For instance, why didn't anyone stand up to Napoleon, the tyrannical pig, who is the main antagonist in the book? How did Napoleon gain power so quickly? Have you ever defended your rights at home, at school, at work, with friends? Which situations are harder than others, and why? For number 2, I had a writing packet that walked them through writing an analysis of the prompt. Pick one leader or one follower and analyze how that character destroys freedom and equality on the farm. Here's one of my favorite conclusions from a 14-year-old student. Benjamin Donkey was the ultimate architect for the obliteration of freedom and equality on Animal Farm, even though he could have become a champion and shield for freedom and equality. Benjamin's role on Animal Farm is essential to understanding that it is the followers, not the leaders, who hold the key to maintaining freedom and equality in any civilization. It's a 14-year-old that said that wrote that. This prompt for the students who took this novel and essay seriously changed and or empowered students to make a positive impact in our world. The final goal was the best and sometimes the scariest lesson I taught all year. Ironically, this great lesson had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the students. For number 3, I conducted a social experiment by telling my students they had rebelled against my authority in the classroom. I can't take credit for this, it was in the teaching notes of the novel. I gave them a list of 5 things they had to accomplish before they could start functioning as a literature class. Number 1, develop a motto or rallying song. Number 2, come up with a new name for the class. Number 3, write commandments, at least 4, for this new classroom. Number 4, create a plan to maintain the purpose of this group as that of a literature class. And number 5, begin functioning as one. I then walked to the back of the room, sat at my desk, took notes, and refused to acknowledge them when they asked me questions. With every experiment, a few things always happened. Someone, or a group, stood up to solve the problems presented, and the class attempted to accomplish the goals under the direction of this leadership. What ensued after that depended on the students' personalities. It was an eye-opening experience for me every time, and a day that has stayed with my students forever. When I first started this social experiment, I thought the goal was for the students to solve the problem of anarchy, right? And to start working as a group, and at the end of the hour to have begun functioning as a literature classroom. I was so wrong. The goal was to show students who they are. The goal was to test the theory that power corrupts. The goal was to see the problem solvers, the goal was to see who the problem solvers were and who would remain passive. More importantly, the experiment always revealed the natural leaders and what kind of leaders they were. Surprisingly, it was not always the smartest students who took over leadership, but it was a bonus if they were intelligent. Usually it was the student who had natural charisma because students always followed someone that they thought was likable. If the popular student did not stand up and take over right away, someone invariably nominated him or her to the position. Whether that student remained in power or not depended on whether he or she was a good good leader and problem solver, and whether or not there were other leaders in the classroom. Sadly, the girls only remained in power if they were working in conjunction with a male student. Even girls were horrible to any girl who dared to stand in leadership above them. My goal was to be an observer and report what I saw, and then afterwards ask questions about motivation and behaviors. Students decided what happened in the classroom. If someone needed to go to the bathroom, he could decide to leave the room. I would not give or deny permission to anyone. And I always liked when that student would just leave. It just showed that he had so much courage. Students could get involved or listen to their music if they wanted. They could start another rebellion against the new leadership or follow the new leader completely. It was always their choice. Throughout the years, I had every possible scenario, yet every year, students surprised me with a new twist. There were students I would vote for if they ran for political office, and then there were students I would protest against if they ever tried. But mostly, there were students who were forever changed by looking into the Animal Farm mirror. Here are a few of the most interesting outcomes. One year, I had a student, Todd, who was bright but was in my regular English class opposed to my honors English. He read the whole novel over the weekend instead of just the first 2 chapters I assigned. When I wrote the instructions on the board, he knew what I was doing instantly. To his amazement, the students told Todd to take over leadership. Instead of speaking to the class, he asked another student to come up with him. Todd never spoke to the class once. He spoke to this other boy who then spoke to the class, and everyone accepted this behavior. It was at this point that my heart started racing, but not as much as it did by the end of the hour. Todd started creating rules through his chief propagandist that everyone followed blindly. He started with simple crowd-pleasing rules like no homework ever. And then he moved to all adults suck and must be avoided at all cost. Some students actually turned towards me like they were going to physically remove me from the classroom. It was then that Todd's mouthpiece told them that I was not really there, so they just had to ignore me. The class looked up at him with adoration. By the end, he had people wearing red at the back of the class facing the wall because he hated the color red, and people wearing black sitting up front near him. There were no objections. There were no abstainers. They all blindly followed him. Todd caught my eye at one point, and we just looked at each other with shock tinged with fear. He could not believe they were actually doing everything he told them to do. When I stood up to report back, I begged Todd not to go into politics unless he promised me he would use his powers for good, not evil. He laughed and promised he would not. The class's only explanation for their behavior was, Todd is cool. We just wanted him to like us. Obviously, people in this class could not solve a problem they didn't realize existed. Another situation was with my honors English class. After I walked to the back of the room, 2 students stood up and tried to lead the group. The class demanded that an election take place first. There were at least 15 students on the ballot. After much debate, an election gave the position to the top 2 students. No one was happy. Before they could accomplish any of the tasks, another rebellion occurred. 2 new students took over. Within 10 minutes, another rebellion occurred. This happened for the entire hour of the experiment. At first, I was frustrated. I was ready to tell them they failed the experiment. Instead, I asked them what they thought of it. They were the ones who revealed that since they were all leaders, they could not fathom someone else in leadership over them. They then realized that they had to figure out how to get things done without one leader in charge. They thought if the experiment continued, they could assign positions to all the leaders according to their strengths. This was the ultimate class of problem solvers. I've always regretted not continuing this experiment with that class. They might have solved all the problems facing education today. Every once in a while, I would have a student who stood up and led, not as a dictator, but as a leader of the people. He would accept every suggestion and value everyone's input, even if some of the suggestions were ridiculous. I only had a few students who actually led that way over the years, but I hope that those few students find their way into politics. One year, I had a boy come talk to me after the experiment was over. He didn't like how he was feeling about the process. Paul stepped into leadership and had the support of the group until he started yelling at them. A few students started talking rebellion against him, but nothing developed. To top it off, Paul told another student that no one cared what this student thought and to sit down and shut up. When I reported back to the class, I asked why no one told Paul that his behavior was not okay. The majority of the class thought that Paul was right and the protester was just being a jerk. even though Paul was supported by his peers, he got a good look at himself and didn't like what he saw. He sat before me deflated. Paul had always thought he was a great guy and didn't understand what happened to him. I told him I knew he felt bad about his behavior, but that he was given a gift. He saw what power could do to him. He had the opportunity to decide if he wanted to be shaped by power or if he wanted to use his natural leadership for good. I reassured Paul that I thought he was a wonderful person and that I believed in him. If he looked at the experiment as a rare opportunity to see his future path and to decide if that was who he wanted to be or not, Paul could start making changes before his personality went too far in the wrong direction. Now was the time for him to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. Paul smiled and thanked me for helping him feel better. I know that even though his ego is slightly bruised, he will take his leadership position more seriously from now on. So here are some of my suggestions. This is kind of the format of the entire book. So parents can help their child become a problem solver by letting her solve problems. Instead of telling a child what to do and how to do it, parents can present problems to their child and ask how she would solve them. Here are some problems that children can work together with parents to solve. People are coming to the house in an hour for a visit, but the house is messy. What are the most important things to clean? Who should do what? Mom and dad only have a certain amount of money to spend for a child's birthday. Should they host a party and not buy a present? Should they buy a present and not host a party? Is there another solution? How should a family decide who gets to use the computer and when? When is the best time to do homework? As the child gets older, she should become responsible for solving other problems. What should I do if I forget my homework at school? What should I do if I don't understand my homework? When should I start working on this project? What should I do if I'm going to miss school? The idea is that parents need to be raising independent problem solvers. So this is just one of many skills that can give children the advantage they need to succeed in a cookie-cutter education system. Thank you. Are there any questions or any comments or no pressure? All right, well, thank you. You can see Tom at the register if you're interested in buying.
Oh, somebody must have questions.
Come on. Questions?
Are those the real names of your students?
No, I changed names to protect them.
I have a question.
I think they recognize themselves, though. I had a couple recognize themselves already.
I'll just stand here and ask questions all night.
Yay.
I don't know why people don't want to ask questions.
Hey, Papa.
So, my daughter's in second grade, so I'm still, fairly new to the whole school thing. But it's pretty obvious that the parents who are showing up are the parents of the kids who least need the parents to show up, because they're the parents that show up. So how do you break that? Because me reading this book is interesting, but it's not as useful as a parent who needs to read this book reading this book. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. And I wonder the same thing, because a lot of the people that are probably interested in buying the book right now won't need as much of the guidance in it as the parents that might not even look at it. So I know as a teacher, I would always invite the parents that I really wanted to see to come to the parent-teacher conferences, to come and talk to me, or to open up an engaging conversation with them. But it's really hard, especially now. We have, in so many situations, we have parents that are completely opposed to teachers. That was one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because I wanted to bridge that gap that has developed over the past 12 years or so between parents and teachers. We used to work together. We used to be in partnership together. And if I did something at school, I would get in trouble at home. Now, if kids do something at school, the teacher gets called. Why did you yell at my child? And so, realizing that as parents, and to invite as many parents as we possibly can into the conversation, whether they will say, I don't want to go to school, I don't want to talk to the teachers, I don't want to get involved, I'll just let my kid take care of it, but to try and encourage them, anybody, to encourage parents to join the conversation and become partners with teachers in the school, because it really makes a difference when parents and teachers are working together for the benefit of the child. So I know that I didn't quite answer how to overcome that, but I guess just opening up conversation wherever we can, because even as parents, encouraging other parents to get to the school, to talk to the teachers, because we all have to have our children in those classrooms with those kids. And if the parents aren't all working together with the teacher, with the children, it can create some very difficult situations, and just to encourage that open communication for all, And I think sometimes hearing it from a parent is better than hearing it from a teacher. You really should go talk to the teacher. Talk to the teacher about it first. Don't get angry yet, Whatever we can do as parents to give advice to other parents that might not know what to do, I think would be a step in the right direction.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So it's very clear that you bring a lot of passion to teaching, and you bring ideas that are unique and that are going to cultivate the type of environment that you want children to learn in. And I have friends that are teachers who do the same thing, and so I'm very excited and enthralled by that attitude. But I think that there are probably teachers who are attracted to the position who don't necessarily have that, bring that passion or bring that energy to the classroom. You had alluded to standards being a good thing in education, not necessarily a required test, but what is the ideal solution? How do you continue, while not necessarily slapping people on the wrist or holding people to regulations? How do you ensure that education as a whole is the quality that we need?
That's a great question. One of the things that I know there's a whole bunch of things have to happen simultaneously in order for education to improve the way that I would like to see it improve. And number one, we would have to definitely improve the climate for the way how teachers are teaching in the classroom. They need more support from administrators, from parents. And so it becomes more of a desired profession for people that are passionate about teaching to get into. I know that one of the things that are happening right now is that we are losing people that would be great teachers. They're not getting into the profession anymore. It's at an all-time low, the enrollment in teacher prep schools. And so we're going to be losing a lot of people that would have the passion to become teachers. And so we definitely want to hire the best possible, and the only way to do that first is to change the climate in education, especially towards teachers. And then the other thing is that right now it's a very punitive system. We have administrators coming down really hard. You might say we don't want to slap their wrist, but that's kind of what's happening right now. We're getting teachers that are punished. They're being talked to in a negative way instead of encouraged to find that passion inside of themselves again. So it could be a teacher that's lost his or her way, or a teacher that's just coming in and is very frustrated with all the things that have to be done. But instead of punishing the teachers that aren't meeting those standards, we need to have a system where we can come alongside them. I asked my administrators, can I please be that person? Can I come alongside those new teachers and really help them establish not only they're teaching the curriculum and everything, but to remind them why they got involved in the first place. Remind them of the passion that every child that sits in our classroom is a gift to us. We are here for that reason, to help that child to change a life, to improve a life. And and I was able to do that. I had a couple of teachers. I had a student teacher one year. I had some new teachers that I worked with and helped them work through some of their issues. But that is one thing that really has to change. I know that we're hiring a whole bunch of new teachers because a lot of the teachers that have been around for a long time are resigning very, very quickly now with all the things that are happening in education. So we're going to have many schools that have brand new teachers 5 years or less because teachers aren't sticking around as long as they used to. And so if we continue to let teachers leave before they become master teachers, it's really going to make the situation even worse. So I think those two things right there would probably help out a lot. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Did I say more than I should have? Any other questions?
I think, Pauline, this isn't really a question but a comment. It's really interesting for me as a teacher in Australia to listen to you, because we are having the same issues.
Are you?
I was really interested in your uncommon core comments, because we are going back to teaching content, not the child. We are going back to a system that was thrown out when I was in high school.
Because it wasn't working.
Quite a long time ago, of having external exams across the board. So every student doing English across the state will be doing the exact same exam on at the exact same time. And that's going to dictate a person's matriculation or university entrance.
Right.
So, we are having the same issues. We're having the same issues with a punitive system towards teachers, and there's just I'm doing some mentoring also, and the young teachers are saying to me, I haven't got time to do that because I have to do all this other stuff.
I have to write down every bit of my lesson plans and my objectives, and it's not bad to have a lesson plan, but to have to then explain why you're doing all of those things on top of having the lesson plan. That's when it starts to get a little much.
Yeah, so it's a sad situation.
It really
We're
is.
all getting into
It
it.
really is. And it's so hard. It's so hard to be able to work with an individual child in a certain way when you have other children that, you can't just let them do their own thing while you're working with this other child anymore. It's like everyone has to be addressed. It's just, I don't know, they're creating a no-win situation that's getting worse and worse. And I wish they would just make me Queen of Education. I would fix it all.
Do you get more freedom teaching at Great Bay than?
Yes, it's incredible.